Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Mama's Murder, the podcast where each week we discuss a different true crime case. I'm Elisa Birdhill, and this week we are going to be talking about. It's a surprise. I'm not going to say it. I will tell you that originally this week's episode was supposed to be Natalee Holloway. I know a lot of you have been asking for Natalee Holloway, and I've been wanting to get around to it, and that was the plan. But then I realized that I just did Brittany Drexel last week, and as I've told you guys before, I have a special place in my heart for missing person cases, but I didn't want to do two that are fairly similar, actually. Brittany Drexel and Natalee Holloway have a lot of similarities, so I didn't want to do those two back to back. So instead, I decided to do something different. I am really excited about this case. It is an OG case. I will also say I have attempted to record this episode multiple times. It seems that there was always a child needing something, a load of clothes in my washer, or my dishes in my dishwasher, or a child that needed a bath or a shower. And unfortunately, anytime that water is running through my house, the microphone picks it up. And I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can hear it when I'm editing, and it bothers me. So I try to eliminate that. However, the dishwasher and the washing machine are running right now. It's just going to have to be what it is. Like I said, I try to avoid that. But with our busy schedules, and it's picking up even more because the kids are, it's approaching time for us to go back to school, I guess it's just going to have to be part of it. There's not really anything I can do about it. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this case. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. That is, of course, the Lizzie Borden rhyme. It is catchy and unforgettable. However, almost none of it is true. This song has always bothered me because it's just factually incorrect. Not only that, but there would be a version of it where it's catchy and rhymes and is correct. That is if you think Lizzie is guilty. The victims weren't Lizzie's mother. Abby was her stepmother, and they weren't struck 40 or 41 times. But we're skipping to the end. Let's start at the beginning with the victims. The most popular victim is Lizzie's father. That's Andrew Borden. Andrew was a very wealthy man, very, very wealthy by the standards of the 1890s. He lived surprisingly frugal, though. A lot of his family members would call him cheap. Instead of moving into one of the Fall River, Massachusetts neighborhoods that were, a little more put together and things like that, he kept his family in a modest home without many of the luxuries that wealthy families enjoyed, like, plumbing and water and things like that. Some say that Lizzie and Emma, which are his daughters, were very upset about this, and that it kept their family kind of at odds with each other and made the family dynamic more difficult than it needed to be. Which, honestly, I kind of can't say I blame them. My views on being a parent is that our job is to give our children a better life than the one we had. So, while him wanting to live within his means and stay as wealthy as possible, I get it, but running water probably wouldn't have caused him to go broke in the end. Most people assume that Lizzie was young, especially when they realized that she was still living home with her dad, but it's important to remember the times. Daughters generally didn't move out until they were married. So at the age of 32 and unwed, Lizzie still lived at home with her dad, along with her sister Emma, who was in her 40s, and Emma was also not married. And then Andrew's second wife, Abby, the other victim, being the girl's stepmom, lived in the home, and they also had a live-in maid named Bridget. Like I said, family relationships were strained. Lizzie reportedly did not like Abby and refused to call her mother and instead referred to her as Mrs. Borden, which, I mean, the woman is in her 30s. Why would she call this step parent mother? I mean, really, she probably could have just called her Abby. Disputes over money were, frequent, and property too made things worse. Then, on August 4th, 1892, on a hot summer morning, Andrew left home at around 9 a.m. to run errands in town. Inside the house were Abby, Lizzie, and Bridget, the maid. Around 9:30, Abby went upstairs. She was making the bed in the guest room because the family had a visitor, which I will get into later because it just doesn't make sense to talk about right now. But she was making the guest room bed. I am curious as to why Bridget would not be doing that, but that's neither here nor there. Abby would not come back downstairs. Someone attacked her from behind with a sharp weapon believed to have been a hatchet or an axe, and she suffered multiple blows to the head. Not 40, though. The attack was brutal. Whoever committed it appeared determined to make absolutely certain that she was dead. Less than an hour later, Andrew returned home. He settled into the sitting room sofa for a rest, and then moments later, he was also attacked. The killer struck him reportedly in the face and the head, but unlike Abby, Andrew's body would not lay waiting to be found. He was found almost immediately by Lizzie. At approximately 11:15 a.m., Lizzie called for Bridget. She reportedly shouted, quote, "Come quick, father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him," end quote. Which, those who think she's guilty would hear that and say, oh, she is already trying to control the narrative. She is already saying, somebody came in and did this. It couldn't be me. Neighbors rushed over, doctors showed up, and then eventually the police arrived. An investigation began almost immediately. At first glance, the crime scene seemed off. There was no obvious robbery, nothing appeared significantly disturbed or damaged. There were no signs suggesting an intruder had made entry into the home. The murders happened in broad daylight, and yet no one claimed to have seen or heard the killer. Police questioned everyone in the house. Bridget said she'd been resting in her attic room after washing the windows. She claimed that she had not heard any sorts of struggle or fights. Abby was also questioned. She said she'd been outside in the barn looking for fishing sinkers or bits of iron. The problem, though, with Abby's story is that it was extremely hot that day. Investigators questioned why anyone would spend time in an unbearably warm loft in a barn on such a warm day. Her timeline also shifted slightly during questioning, not enough to prove guilt, but enough to cause suspicion. This is something often pointed to in the investigation, and my opinion is that you can't really win. If you don't change up your verbiage when you're talking, they'll say that you rehearsed it and you planned what you were going to say and you're lying. And if you do change small details or words, then you're making it up and you're lying. So it frustrates me. It's quite literally you're damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation and something like that. That happens in a lot of cases, and in a lot of cases I do think those people are guilty, but it's almost like when you're watching these documentaries and things, as I said, depending on what side this person falls on, they will either say, well, they did change their story or they didn't. And so I feel like investigators and body language experts and true crime experts, and I'm including myself in that, read too much into it and they use it to fit whatever narrative they believe, and I just don't like that. So that doesn't really hold much weight for me personally. The investigators would learn something else, though, that was shocking about Lizzie. The day before the murders, several members of the household became ill. Lizzie reportedly suggested someone may have tried to poison the family. When this was investigated further, it was discovered that Lizzie herself had been the one to buy the poison. Was this a moment of her telling a little bit of truth, or was she just trying to stir up the police and offer an alternative explanation? We probably will never know. Police searched the Borden property extensively. They looked for the murder weapon, they looked for bloody clothing, any physical evidence linking someone to the crime. And what they found was not very much at all. Keep in mind it is 1892. It's not like they could fingerprint. Eventually, investigators did discover a hatchet in the basement, and the handle of it appeared to be broken. Some believe it could have been the murder weapon, but others argue that there was not enough evidence to prove it. Truthfully, like I said, how much could be proven in the 1890s? If you do not catch someone red-handed, what was the likelihood of catching them at all? Especially when seemingly all of your suspects live in the home. Another troubling detail would come out. A witness claimed Lizzie had burned one of her dresses several days after the murders. Lizzie reportedly explained that it had been stained with paint. Critics wondered whether it had actually been stained with blood instead of paint. But as I said, unfortunately, the forensic science in 1892 was not the greatest. There, of course, is no DNA testing, no luminol spray, no fingerprint analysis. Investigators relied heavily on witness testimony, which, as we learned, there weren't any real witnesses. They also had circumstantial evidence and, truthfully, just their belief in gut that because she found the body, Lizzie must be guilty. Public opinion also formed almost immediately. Newspapers could not get enough of the story. The image of a respectable Sunday school teacher secretly murdering her father and stepmother was really shocking. I honestly think just the idea of a woman in general being a murderer at all probably stunned everyone back then. Women at the time were widely viewed as naturally gentle and nurturing. The idea that a middle-class woman would commit such horrific violence seemed almost unbelievable. Ironically, that assumption may have worked in Lizzie's favor when it came time for her trial. The trial began in 1893. It became one of the largest courtroom spectacles of the century. And sometimes I feel like that term is overused. I think often every case gets referred to as the case of the century. But given the circumstances here, I think that is probably a pretty accurate description of the Borden case. Reporters packed into the courtroom. Oh, and I'm going to pause here. I just want to say the fact that even in the 1800s, we were so obsessed with headlines and cases and things. People think that true crime is a new phenomenon. People like to call those of us who are into true crime, like they say we're gross or we're disrespectful. That's not the case at all. I find consuming documentaries and podcasts a lot more respectful than people who used to go watch public hangings. True crime is not new. The way we consume it is new. And even over time, we have seen that change. Documentaries used to be a bunch of people sitting down and telling their story. Now, because so many police departments are using body cam footage all the time, a lot of our documentaries, and this actually started with the Chris Watts documentary because so much of that happened immediately thanks to Shanann's best friend Nicole, like clocking Chris so he did not have time to finish cleaning up. So much of that case was covered in the body cam, and that documentary was made, that it kind of shifted the whole way documentaries are made now. And a lot of it is body cam interrogation. I don't know if you guys watched the Maternal Instinct. So much of that and they only had a couple of instances where they were in person with her, but it was body cam, it was interrogation. So again, I just think that there's nothing wrong with consuming true crime the way we do. It's not like we are sitting outside of victims' hospital rooms, or, I personally find more issues with Nancy Grace setting a table up outside of the house where the Idaho 4 were killed as the investigation is still going on than I do someone making a podcast or a documentary. It's all the same to me. So I got off on a little side tangent there, but just to say that true crime is not new. The way we consume it is always evolving, and that's all. So, reporters packed the courtroom. Curious citizens lined the streets. Every detail became headline news. The prosecution argued that Lizzie had motive. It was money, family resentment, years of conflict, opportunity. She was in the house. She had opportunity. No stranger had been seen entering or leaving, so the suspect pool was small. The defense took a different approach, of course. They emphasized that the investigation could not prove anything. No murder weapon was linked to Lizzie. No eyewitnesses had seen her commit the murders. No blood-covered clothes were recovered. And really, most importantly, the investigation itself had been flawed. Evidence was mishandled. The crime scene wasn't properly secured. People wandered through the house before it had been processed. Potential evidence may have been contaminated or even lost. One major thing that was focused on was Lizzie's statements to the police. We talked about those a little bit earlier. It came out at trial that she had been questioned while reportedly being under the influence of morphine that was described to her by her physician. This, they say, is what caused her answers to be inconsistent. The judge ultimately ruled that a lot of her statements would be inadmissible due to this, which actually weakened the prosecution's case. Then there was another development. Testimony about Lizzie's attempting to purchase the poison before the murders was also deemed inadmissible. Without that evidence, prosecutors lost another persuasive argument they had to show that this had been a pattern of behavior and not the first attempt on Abby and Andrew's lives. After hearing weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only about 90 minutes. Guys, trials and verdicts used to be so quick. I imagine that someone who lived back then would literally roll over in their grave at the thought of us having trials that take... I have no idea what that noise is. I'm so sorry. Having trials that take... Oh, and now the air's on. Great. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I think they would roll over in their grave at the thought of us having trials that take months. And then, in some cases, that is at a deadlock, and it's a mistrial, and we have to start all over again. And I'm thinking specifically about the Karen Reed case. It was months and months and months. She was retried, and it was more months and months and months. And I think that they would have a hard time deliberating for days on end, and then a judge sending it back and saying, nope, try again. Either way, after their 90 minutes of deliberation, their verdict, Lizzie was not guilty. She walked free. The courtroom erupted. Some people were celebrating. Some people were outraged. Many believed that justice had failed. But legally, the case was over, and nothing more could be done. After the trial, Lizzie and Emma remained in Fall River area of Massachusetts. Ironically, they moved into a much larger, fancier home, the kind that they would have liked to have lived in when their dad was still alive. Lizzie became involved in theater and entertaining. She became friends with a lot of actors. Her reputation really never fully recovered, though. Many townspeople would avoid her. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Years later, Emma would unexpectedly move away. The sisters reportedly never spoke again. No one knows exactly why, but there are some guesses, and again, we'll get into that later. This is something that has always puzzled me as someone who has a difficult relationship with their sister. It takes a lot to let go of those relationships. A little lore about me for those of you who don't know me super well. I didn't meet my biological sister until I was in 8th grade and she was a senior in high school. I always knew about her, and I assumed she lived in Michigan, where our mom had lived with her dad. But shout out to Tom, because when Facebook came around, my cousin actually found my sister on Facebook and discovered that we had actually lived our entire lives about 20 minutes apart from each other. She had no idea that I existed or that we had an older brother. I actually used to wish on my birthday candles that I would get to meet her. And fun fact, we also share a birthday. She is 5 years older, though. We met and we were instantly close at first. The natural instinct to just be sisterly was there from moment one. And again, that probably helps that we share a birthday. That's instantly something to bond over. But over time, and due to just unfortunate family circumstances, distance was put in between us, and it's a hard pill to swallow. We both love each other, and closeness just isn't in the cards for us in this season of life, which makes me very sad. However, referring that back to Lizzie and Abby's story, I couldn't imagine having your whole life with your sister. I mean, they lived together until well into their, what we would consider, elderly years, especially for the time period. And really, that sister being the only other person on earth to understand what you went through, and then just not being able to work it out and be there for each other, that is very sad, and it breaks my heart for them. Also, I don't know if she listens, but shout out to my sister. I'm not going to say your name in case you don't want me to, but things are hard, but you do know I love you. Lizzie Borden died in 1927, still maintaining her innocence. Supporters of Lizzie point to the lack of physical evidence. No proven weapon, no confession, no eyewitnesses. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what is going on with my voice. No bloodstained clothing. So, did she do it? Critics argue the murders would have been extraordinarily difficult to commit without leaving any obvious traces. Others believe that investigators focused too quickly on Lizzie and overlooked alternative suspects, like the uncle. And guys, I can't believe I got this far into this story before it was a good time to bring this up. Andrew's ex-brother-in-law, John, had been in town and stayed with the Bordens. This is why Abby was making the guest room bed, reportedly leaving around the same time as Andrew on the morning of the murders. John was the brother of Andrew's first wife, making him Lizzie and Emma's uncle. John was a butcher, so he would have the strength, skill, and guts to commit a murder by axe. John had motive, as he was often accused by Abby and Andrew of siding with his nieces when they accused him of being cheap. Some believe that it's possible he didn't act alone and that he planned the murders with Emma and Lizzie. John provided an airtight alibi to police that was backed up by both girls claiming that he wasn't anywhere near the home at the time of the murders. Later, some investigators re-examining the case would admit that his alibi was almost too perfect. Many researchers remain convinced that Lizzie was guilty. They point to the motive of inheritance and her contradictory statements, the fact that she burned the dress, the absence of any sign suggesting an outsider had entered the home. Some theorize that she acted alone, others believe that someone helped her. Over the decades, countless alternative suspects have been proposed: a disgruntled business associate, an unknown intruder, Uncle John, even Bridget Sullivan, the maid. Speaking of, again, I can't believe it's taken this long to get to a place where this was a good thing to talk about, but a lot of modern day investigators that have given the case another look think that Bridget and Lizzie could have been in a lesbian relationship and acted together to kill Andrew and Abby. I think it's no secret that same-sex relationships wouldn't have been accepted during that time, but even more with her controlling father in the picture. People who believe this theory also believe that Lizzie went on to have a relationship with a famous actress, Nance O'Neill, and that this relationship is what would ultimately cause the fallout between Lizzie and Emma. Again, that has not been proven. It is just a theory. None of these theories have ever been supported by enough evidence to solve the case for good. And in my opinion, that's what makes Lizzie so fascinating, or I guess the Borden murders so fascinating. It's not really about the violence, it's about the uncertainty. It's been 130 years and we're still asking the same questions that were being asked in 1892. Who killed Andrew and Abby? And did the killer avoid detection? If Lizzie wasn't responsible, who was? I personally think that the Borden case is to the 1890s as the JonBenet Ramsey case will be to the 1990s. Every year something comes out. They think they have new evidence. This is the year it's going to be solved. Or John's not... Wow, it just hit me that there's a John in that story and this one. But John's not doing well. Maybe on his deathbed he'll tell us. People still talk about it. But the investigation was so flawed that it will likely never be possible for it to actually be solved. While one case is a child murder and the other is a suspected child killing the parents, and they are more than 100 years apart, I find them to be incredibly similar to one another. I can say with confidence that we will never know what happened with Lizzie Borden. You're just gonna have to pick a side. Do you believe she did it or you believe she didn't? And I think that's where a lot of people have landed with JonBenet as well. We're never gonna know. They could convict someone tomorrow and I still wouldn't believe that that was the person, because so much has gone on and changed and everything. So I think what a lot of people do is they just pick the theory that they believe is the strongest, and that's what they go with. I think cases like this refuse to fade away because every generation revisits it. I mean, JonBenet was older than me. I think it's just going to be that case. Every generation thinks that they can be the one to solve it, or that they're going to discover the new thing. But really all that they discover is that it's always going to be a mystery. For me, in this case, like I said, you just have to pick what side you believe and go with it. So personally, I think for me that the uncle theory holds the most weight. I think that the statistics of him being in town and then just happening to be leaving the day that 2 murders were committed seems a little too perfect, just like his alibi. It's very suspicious. Do I think that Lizzie could have helped or been part of it? Absolutely, I do. But I don't think that the evidence is strong enough to convict her. So I do think that the jury made a good choice, even if they did only deliberate for an hour and a half. As I mentioned, I hate that Lizzie and Emma weren't able to have a good, healthy sisterly relationship, because every sister deserves that connection. But personally, I do think the uncle theory is it. And I don't know where I stand on Emma's involvement. I really don't. I think that had Emma known, she probably would have given her sister up. And I have nothing to base that on other than the way I feel. As a side note, you guys know how I am with travel, and staying at the Borden house is absolutely on my bucket list of something to do. You can rent it out, and it is decorated and staged the way it was when the murders happened. So, like, the bed is where the bed was, and the dresser's where the dresser was. And I think they may even have crime scene photos hung up. I'm not 100% certain on that one. I can't remember if I've heard that or if that's a rumor, or either way. Definitely adding staying there to my bucket list. Very exciting. That is all I have for you guys today. I enjoyed doing an older case, a case that everyone has talked about, but it seems no one can agree on. So maybe we will have more historic cases in the future. See you next time. Bye.